Welcome to the Monsters Among Us podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 11, The Pascagoula Abduction.
We're looking at October 11th, 1973 tonight.
That's right, down near the Pascagoula River in Mississippi.
And it involves two guys, Charles Hickson, who is 42, and Calvin Parker, much younger, only 19.
And their claim was, well, it was pretty extraordinary. They said they were fishing when they got abducted.
Abducted and examined by alien beings. That was the core report.
So in this deep dive, we're going to, unpack their story.
Yeah, look at the claims, how the investigation went down or didn't.
Exactly. And how the public reacted, the media frenzy.
And its sort of lasting shadow, you could say, in ufology, the whole study of this stuff.
Okay, so let's start with the scene. They're fishing, right? Off a pier.
Yep, west bank of the Pascagoula River, evening time.
And it starts with a sound and lights.
Uh-huh. They both mentioned this weird sound, like a whirring or maybe a whizzing noise.
Okay.
And then these two flashing blue lights appeared. That was the first sign something was off.
And then the object itself showed up. How did they describe that?
Well, they said it was oval-shaped. And pretty big, actually. Their estimate was something like 30 to 40 feet across.
Wow, that's substantial.
And maybe 8 or 10 feet high. So not small.
And the really strange part, for me anyway, is how they reacted. Or couldn't react.
Right. Both of them said they were, quote, conscious but paralyzed. Couldn't move.
Conscious but paralyzed. Imagine that.
And it's in that state they see these beings. 3 of them, they reported.
Like these weren't your typical little green men, were they? The description is really specific.
No, not at all. They described robotic slit mouths.
Robotic slit mouths.
And crab-like pincers. That's the detail that always jumps out.
Yeah, crab-like pincers. That would stick with you. You can see why this story really grabbed people.
Absolutely. And the main claim, the core of it all, was that these beings took them.
Took them right off the pier and onto the object.
That's what they said. Taken aboard, subjected to some kind of examination. They didn't really detail what exactly. And then they were returned to the pier.
And, the timing of this, 1973, people were really thinking about space then, weren't they?
Oh, definitely. The Apollo missions were still fresh, lots of sci-fi. It was in the air.
So that probably added fuel to the fire when the story got out?
I think so. It landed in a receptive or at least curious environment.
And unlike maybe some other stories, they didn't just, keep it to themselves. They went to the authorities.
They did. Straight to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, which is a pretty big step.
And the police. They listened. The source material suggests they actually believed them, at least initially.
Well, that's the report, that the police took it seriously enough to investigate. Details on what the investigation found at the scene, if anything, are a bit thin.
Right. No smoking gun, no alien artifacts left behind, presumably.
Presumably not. But the fact that law enforcement was involved at all and seemed to credit their story gave it a certain legitimacy, or at least made people pay more attention.
Yeah, it lent it a different kind of weight.
And that initial report really kicked things off in terms of public awareness.
The story got out pretty fast, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. It became big news. And Charles Hickson especially, he really stepped into the spotlight.
How so?
Well, he started giving interviews, lots of them, lectures, TV appearances. He was even on that show to tell the truth.
To tell the truth. Seriously. Wow. Going on national TV with a story like that takes... Well, it takes something.
It certainly does. And he didn't stop there.
Oh.
In '74, the next year, he claimed he had more encounters.
More encounters, okay.
And then later, in 1983, he put out his own book, self-published, UFO Contact at Pascagoula.
So he really leaned into it, became the public face of the incident.
He did. Now, Calvin Parker, his reaction was quite different, wasn't it?
Yeah, he seemed to shy away from the spotlight, at least early on.
That's right. Much quieter, kept a lower profile compared to Hickson.
But he didn't disappear completely from the scene.
No, not entirely.
Yeah.
Later on, he did get more involved. He'd attend UFO conventions, that sort of thing. And in '93, he actually started a company, UFO Investigations, aiming to make TV programs about UFOs.
Interesting. So he stayed connected to the subject, just in a different way.
Seems like it. And the event itself, it really stuck around in local memory, too.
You mean the historical marker?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Put up in 2019, right there at the spot. Paid for by the local historical society. City approved it.
And Parker was there for that?
He was. Hickson's family, too. Apparently, Parker got quite emotional, said it was an honor, even mentioned wanting to be buried near there.
Wow. It clearly had a massive lasting impact on him personally.
Undeniably. But, with a story this wild, skepticism is inevitable.
Of course. Not everyone bought it.
Far from it. Philip J. Klass, for instance, big name in UFO skepticism, aviation journalist.
What was his take?
He looked into it closely and found what he called discrepancies in Hickson's story.
Okay, discrepancies like what?
Well, one of the main things Klass pointed to was about a polygraph test.
A lie detector.
Yeah. Klass claimed Hickson refused to take one from a really experienced examiner he suggested.
Ah, and Class took that as a bad sign.
He basically concluded from that and other things that the whole story was likely a hoax.
Okay. Was he the only skeptic looking into it?
No, Joe Nickel, another prominent skeptical investigator, also weighed in.
And what did Nickel think?
He found some of Hickson's behavior questionable. And he suggested Hickson might have changed or maybe exaggerated parts of the story over time.
Embellishments. Happens with stories sometimes.
It can. Nickel also floated a possible psychological explanation for Hickson.
Like what?
He speculated about something called a hypnagogic state, basically, like a waking dream. Maybe Hickson experienced something like that.
A waking dream state. Interesting idea.
And Nickel also picked up on something Parker apparently said initially.
What was that?
According to reports, Parker told the police right at the start that he'd actually passed out.
Passed out. When?
Right at the beginning of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And didn't wake up until it was over.
Really? He passed out through the whole alleged abduction.
That was the initial report, and Hickson apparently confirmed that part on To Tell the Truth as well.
Okay, so if he was unconscious.
Well, skeptics like Nickel argue that makes him potentially more suggestible later on. Maybe his memories were influenced by Hickson's account or other things.
Right, that complicates his testimony, if true.
It definitely adds another layer to the puzzle.
So you've got the compelling story from the two men, the police taking it seriously at first.
And then you've got these strong skeptical counterarguments focusing on inconsistencies, refusals, psychological factors.
It leaves you wondering, so putting it all together, why is this Pascagoula case still talked about so much in UFO circles? What makes it stand out?
Well, I think several things make it significant in, UFO lore.
Yeah.
It's just such a detailed, bizarre account. The creatures described, the paralysis, it's memorable.
The crab pincers, yeah.
Right. And the fact they did report it to police and it wasn't immediately dismissed, that gave it some early traction.
Plus all the media attention Hickson generated.
Absolutely. It became one of the classic abduction cases pretty quickly. It's always on those lists of major UFO events.
And both men kept the story alive in their own ways later on, too.
They did. Parker, as we mentioned, eventually wrote his own book in 2018.
What was that one called?
Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, My Story. He framed it as like his first full telling of what happened and how it affected his entire life.
Giving his perspective after years of relative silence.
Exactly. Providing more insight into his experience.
Sadly, though, we can't ask them any more questions about it now.
No. Charles Hickson passed away back in 2011.
And Calvin Parker just died quite recently, didn't he?
Yeah, in 2023. So the primary witnesses are gone now.
Which means the story exists now as this collection of accounts, investigations, and debates.
Precisely. It's a landmark case, but one that remains deeply contested. It really pushes buttons about belief, memory, evidence.
And how we try to make sense of things that just don't fit our everyday understanding.
It's a perfect example of how a local, very strange event can ripple outwards and become part of this much larger, ongoing discussion about the unknown.
Yeah, that fascination with what might be out there or what might have happened on that riverbank.
So a final thought for you listening. Even with all the skeptical points raised, what part of this story, Hickson and Parker's account, the creatures, the aftermath, sticks with you the most? What gives this particular case its enduring power, do you think?
Something to ponder.
Definitely something to mull over. The nature of the experience versus the nature of the evidence.
That's the end of the episode. Until next time. Keep to the shadows. Some legends are best left undiscovered.